Welcome back to the Capital Mindset Show. We are your hosts, Austin and Fabio. And today, Fabio has a special announcement for all of you guys. And that announcement is what? Let us all know.
It's not really an announcement like that. It's more of a clarification of an announcement.
So it is an announcement like that. You're just being shy.
So I guess you're now aware of what I've done. Dirty deed that I've done.
Oh, no, I'm
in
not
the last
aware.
video. Oh, you're not, because you haven't seen the video yet, have you?
Well, I may not be aware. Let's just
may or may
for the
not be
sake of
aware.
this, for this video.
All
I'm
right.
not
So
aware.
for those of you who've seen the most recent Q&A on China, I said at the very end that I would be buying a position in both Tencent and Alibaba.
Wow. Look at you putting your money where your mouth is. And why are you doing this? Why are you committing this?
It's like,
heresy?
why are you doing this? Well, it's for a couple reasons. Well, it's not of anything that is of significant portion of my portfolio. It is to do two things, essentially: to capitalize on the concept that I do believe that the price will have some short-term catalysts, because again, the Chinese have incentives to keep the VIE holders coddled, safe, nice, warm, and fuzzy. So I actually think that there will be actually price movement upwards. That doesn't take away from the fact that I think it is worthless. But I go into it as a gamble. It is completely a gamble. And then two, and probably the most important one, is as I continue to criticize it going forward, it will be from a place of, or people can better understand it's from a place of not malice or intent to harm your portfolio, your investments. I will suffer along with you. So I put $10,000 in both Alibaba and another $10,000 in Tencent. And I just so happen to actually get lucky because Alibaba crashed, and that actually goes into the actual announcement, because this isn't really new. It's more of a clarification. The announcement
so
that we'll talk together.
Let me see if I get this straight, you mad lad.
Yeah.
You, after putting out multiple series, after us putting out multiple series of videos about VIEs, decided to buy into these very same systems. You crazy person.
Yes.
And you
say
did
that.
this with the full intent and full knowledge that you're probably going to lose most of this investment.
Well, I mean, it is a gamble because I'm not doing it for the fundamentals. It's entirely a gamble.
It's just price go up. Literally.
Yeah, it's price go up. I'm not intending to make money with it, but I think that there is a good reason or a good part of my thesis, basically, if we're taking it from a perspective that I'm not trying to lose money, it would be that I do believe the Chinese have a huge incentive to calm this down, because they're basically getting something. They're getting money for nothing, and it's allowing them to build out their businesses in a meaningful way. So I don't believe, for that reason, again, because I fundamentally believe that you have nothing when you buy these VIEs. And we've talked about other VIEs on this channel, and I believe this video will come out before our analysis of Interactive Brokers, which is another VIE or another entity that we're going to be talking about. But watch that video for the greater details on that. And we've covered Rocket Companies, another VIE. And then we will cover Dutch Bros, because we already got that request, which is another VIE. Well, these VIEs are distinct and far more complicated in nature. So I will be holding these VIEs, not taking away from everything I've said. I'll be actually one of the only people on this platform that is long them, but telling others not to be, and to be cautious and to be wary of what they're actually buying. And me saying that I will suffer alongside if there continues to be a loss, or if there is a realization event. What I define a realization event is if somehow the West kind of uncovers this, because this is the true risk for these entities. It would be from the US side of delisting. So if the West kind of boycotts them and decides not to allow capital to flow into them until they open themselves up for actual ownership, that would be severe. But a lot of this is, I'm going to connect to the announcement today. A lot of the newer content about the VIE scare is correct, because it's FUD. Because if I'll show some articles here, and let me tell you how much I cringed, Austin. So we'll go to the source of all this actual BS, and it comes from Bloomberg. So these journalist majors, they, you know, in their infinite wisdom, they describe to the reader a situation in which the Chinese government is going to potentially delist these VIEs. Now, this shows, one, a complete lack of understanding in what these entities are, and it shows when they explain it. So we'll get to that in a second. But we've discussed on this video, or on many videos actually on this channel, the problems with the VIE structure and what the implications are, and why the Chinese would never in 1,000 years remove or revoke the ability for these entities to do so. Now, in isolation, there can be some companies that they don't allow, because if you don't fall within the good graces of the CCP can call it whatever it wants, but basically they do these little security checks to make sure everything's in order before they're allowed to IPO in the West. And it's IPO quotations, because it's not really IPOing. And that being said, the real risk of delisting, which has happened already from, for example, Chinese telecom companies, because of their ties to the US military, I'm sorry, the Chinese military, they were forced to be delisted from the US stock exchange. So you still have that actual risk of the United States acting, but they're arguing that the risk comes from China, which is so silly, so unresearched, because, well, the Chinese government has come out and said that that's not true. And I actually think that it is not true. Sometimes the Chinese government says something, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But in this instance, no, the Chinese government is actually telling the truth, especially when you actually break down what a VIE is, and what really, if the incentives align with them not doing so because they're basically getting something from nothing, then there would be no reason for them to actually delist it. The real risk of delisting comes from the United States, not from China. And the fact that this article doesn't say that shows me their incompetence. Further propelling my statements before that, if you trust in journalist majors to do your investing, ooh, this is not the right industry for you. Let me just say
journalist majors, man.
Journalist majors. No, and oftentimes the journalist majors are at the behest of the finance guys, right? So they sometimes actually, Jim Cramer's talked about this too. It's very true. They are at the behest of the financial industry in a lot of ways. So oftentimes they're like tools, right? And I discussed this in the Discovery video, that I wouldn't want Discovery to sell CNN because they're a good tool to have. Okay. And you know, that's like, let's just face it. If your opinion differs from them, I'm sorry, but that's simply incorrect. These are tools utilized for different means, but this is to kind of showcase a critique. And when you get into a specialized industry and you start to see the journalist majors report on that industry, that's when you can experience the cringe for yourself. And you can kind of wake up and say, okay, well, if they're getting it so wrong on this, then they're probably getting it wrong on other things. So like for example, a lot of the great investors, they'll say they don't use the news at all. They'll just listen to the news here and there, like a little, oh, what are people talking about? But they don't care about their opinion.
Basically, right? Like you read the headlines to see like, oh, let's say XYZ company is acquiring XYZ. That's all you need.
So great. Here's how this, let me actually see this person's name. Okay, whatever. They're not going to post this person's name, I guess, unless they're at the bottom, but whatever. I don't care. Well, they begin by, expressing how the Chinese government is going to ban companies from IPOing. Why would they do this? Okay. So clearly from there, that's already giving me hints that this individual, whoever wrote this or whoever directed this article to be written, does not understand the VIE structure. All right, but they're reporting on the VIE structure. And people, this is the unfortunate part, Austin. People are going to read this and they think of Bloomberg as an arbiter of truth. This is a problem. If the arbiter of truth does not, and I say that in quotations, does not fully understand the scope of what they're discussing, then how are we supposed to trust them to get anything else right? So the answer is I don't. For my investing career, I've never trusted them for pretty much anything. I trust in my own research. I don't trust in their research. It kind of shows the laziness here. But anyway, so the ban is intended to part address concerns over data security is among the, okay, so this is a common excuse I hear. No one's asking the question. Okay, so Austin, you have some experience in programming, right? That doesn't mean you're an expert in data security. But no. I just have a question for you. In what capacity does having your stock, it's a VIE, but like let's pretend it's the stock. What capacity does having your stock exchange, like exchange as in not the actual stock exchange, but your stock being bought and sold in another country, how does that affect your data?
I mean, there isn't really a correlation here.
No, but let's.
However, what I think this person is getting at is, I think in terms of data security, they might be implying the audits.
No, and I'm not. No, I'm not. No, not at all.
I personally, I don't entirely see how.
No, they're legitimately talking about data, like data, not the actual.
Then I don't see how this is a threat to data security at all. Just being honest with you.
Yeah, but no, like we're talking about like just revenues, stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
like data. Like, for example, I've heard arguments from content creators because they're parroting. Unfortunately, they're parroting these people. And so example, like they're saying, for example, Didi, they're going to delist Didi. The Chinese are going to delist Didi because of the data security, whatever. Well, that's weird. And they're talking about the data of like the drivers, the passengers. How does that happen? How do we go from trading a VIE in another country to, oh, now I have access to your servers in China? Really? Is that how it works? Please, someone comment that down below if that's actually how it works. I'd be extremely surprised, and I'm willing to get educated on that. But yeah. I do not see, for example, how trading your stock on another country's exchange leads to said country also having access to your data in your host country. So the servers, Didi servers in China, how does that correlate? I don't know. But apparently that's the reasoning that they are citing. All right. And then the best part at the bottom is what they do with, the classic journalist major excuse, anonymous source. But we'll get there. Anonymous source. So China's Security Regulatory Commission said on Wednesday that the media report about banning the overseas listing of companies using the VI structure is not true without giving further details. Okay, well, I
would actually. I mean, why would they even want to ban the VIE structure? That's really.
But that's what I addressed in the beginning. That shows that they don't understand the VIE. They don't understand the VIE. Companies currently listed in the US and Hong Kong that use the VIEs would need to make adjustments to their ownership structure. Blah, 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 blah. Not going to happen. The Chinese, as long as the Western investor was willing to give them money for the VIE, there's no reason for China to change it. Now, this is where I'll say, I'll take a pause and a notion here. So everyone in aggregation, if the West, or not the West, the world together decides that this is not a fair system and decides to boycott basically the Chinese markets, that would cause them to change. Because I've heard other creators say, and correctly so, the Chinese need capital from foreign markets. They do. They need capital from foreign markets to build their companies. If the world decided tomorrow, next year, that they're going to boycott these entities because they're not actually owning anything, the Chinese would move very quickly and change the system. They would allow foreign investment. But because the foreign investor is willing to get, for lack of a better term, cucked by the Chinese government, then they're perfectly happy to keep the VIE structure. There is no reason for them to do so because the foreign investor is willing to just take it. Okay, at the present moment. Okay, so And then the overhaul would represent one of Beijing's biggest steps to crack down an overseas listing following the New York blah 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 of DD global blah 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 blah. Okay, so this is kind of like the new thing, but remember that DD, everyone forgets what happened in the news for DD. Do you remember exactly what happened to DD? Well, I'll tell you because you're giving me the face if you don't remember, but they pissed off the Chinese regulators.
Okay, yeah.
No, the details, not the, because the crowd's memory is often very short. People forget because, you know, the world moves on. But back when DD IPO'd, they pissed off the Chinese regulators because you got to do things by the book. If you don't show them that they are in control, they're going to punish you. DD's executive team tried to circumvent the CCP. When you try to do something so stupid in a one-party system, right, which is China, then you're going to suffer the consequences. This is why DD is being attacked or singled out, okay? Not because data, like people already forget the reasons and the how angry the CCP was for what DD did. DD was like, oh, we're going to IPO without your express permission. And then the CCP is like, oh yeah, you want to do that? Okay, boom, punishment. And so now they're being punished. It's not because of the data. Someone has to please prove to me that by the VIE being exchanged, remember the VIE has many little nooks and crannies, by it trading on the NYSE, that somehow the United States will have access to the servers in China. Please, I want to see that. All right, so banning VIEs from foreign listings would close a gap that's been used for 2 decades, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's not a gap, it's intentional, it's perfect. It basically justifies them not giving you anything, and then we can, you know, we've been over this over and over and over again. They didn't respond for request to comment. Okay, so the universal ban of the VIE would be complicated. Halt for foreign listings and additional Hong Kong stock exchange would be somewhat okay. The investment banks are already advised by regulators to stop working on new deals for VIEs. Okay, so this is the risk, the actual risk for China. If the United States boycotts China and doesn't allow U.S. capital to go to these Chinese companies, that's a problem for China, right? And that's something China has to figure out. And that actually might be a positive for the United States going forward. And China, again, needs foreign capital to build their businesses still. One day they may not need it, but at the current moment in the current financial system of the globe, they do. So they really do not want, again, this is kind of, well, they're kind of talking both sides, I guess. This is the other weird part about this article, but they're not really saying this is the main point. The main point is still that China is the threat, not that the United States is the threat, even though they're explaining here that the United States did in fact, right? So basically they're saying a fact that is true, and then they're misanalyzing the fact, which is even sadder, right? So, you know, all right, anyway, so here's how you know that they don't even know what they're talking about. Look at this really cute explanation of the VIE. Look at this adorable little explanation. It's a 3 bullet points.
Revenue to shell company.
But here's why this is a problem. So you might be saying I'm being a little too harsh on them. Well, no. I'm not being too harsh on them because this is a very bad explanation of what their VIEs are, right? Because we've talked about other VIEs, but the Chinese VIEs are definitely not like this, okay? So I'll explain a little bit how this is misleading. And this is the problem because the normal person is reading Bloomberg. The normal person is reading Bloomberg. They're getting their information from Bloomberg and they're believing Bloomberg. And then they're going to go home, they're going to go out through their life, and then this is how they think the VIE is. And this is the problem with information being bad. These sources have no incentive to give you the greatest quality of information, which is, again, I don't know. That's why the finance media is like the biggest wake-up call about why they may be unreliable. Journalist majors are sometimes the most unreliable people. Individual journalists throughout history have been great. If you actually look back over time, it's always been individual journalists. It's never been an aggregation of an organization. It's never been that. So there's always been great journalists. Because they are the ones who drive and ask questions and investigate. They don't like do this mosh pit of like, you know, weak ideas and then come and actually use some facts, but then come to weak conclusions, right? But anyway, this shows me that they didn't understand what the VIE is. And here, you know, in this one, they show the Chinese owner, the Chinese company. They show this, the revenue to the shell company. as if the revenue is going to the shell company. So I'm going to take away my hat from kind of like someone who understands or thinks they understand the VIE. And I'm going to come at it as if I've just seen this for the first time ever. I'm looking at this picture and I can reasonably conclude, right, from this image that the Chinese company is giving its revenue to the foreign shell company.
Yeah,
knowing what we know,
or even then, you can even also reasonably conclude too, operating from the axiom that you actually own businesses, that you have entitlement to the revenue in this instance, because there isn't exactly a disclosure here that I'm seeing.
You're going too deep. You're going too deep. I'm just going
basic
from the surface. I'm looking at this picture.
Yeah,
Picture
company
have
give
arrow.
revenue to shell. Yeah, basically.
Picture have arrow, and on top of arrow is dollar bills. Dollar bills go to the shell company. I own shell company. I get dollar bill. Yeah. See, that's what I'm looking here, right? So then it's so simple. It's like a 3-step process, super easy. So it doesn't conclude or doesn't tell you that, hey, look, these 3 shadow figures over here, well, they're the actual owners of the shell company, and also not the shell company, sorry, the actual company. And they're also the custodians of the actual shares, right? And so you are making an agreement, a series of contracts with an agreement with those people at the end of the day, who then own the actual shares. And then they are supposed to, at one point in the future, whenever they kind of decide to, share the profits with you, because there's no stipulation that they have to continuously do that, because it's not a royalty agreement. And unlike the VIEs that we've shown in such as rocket companies, and now if you've seen the video of interactive brokers, there's no direct link of economic interest, right? Am I making sense? I'm looking at this picture and I'm immediately thinking, as someone who's never seen a VIE before, I'm thinking of myself as a normal civilian in the United States. And I see, oh, Chinese company gives revenue to foreign shell company. I know it does say here, an agreement is signed with the foreign shell company, which provides an investment in exchange for. A lot of people are going to read that and say kind of word vomit, okay? And they're going to see that they're going to go off of the imagery. But even this it's pretty weak. It's not giving you the details of what that means. What does the agreement entail? What is that? Can it be broken? What would break it? You know, and then we've added that nuance that nothing really could technically break it. Like I've asked Austin the challenge question: at which point in the future would it be broken? How long would you have to wait for them to return capital to you for you to consider it to be broken? In a legal sense, there is no stipulation on time. So it could be 1,000,000 years and it wouldn't be broken. And then we've discussed how in a regular company, there is always going to be the incentive to return capital to you at some point, because you control the business in aggregation with all the other shareholders, right? And we've discussed in the American VIEs and the British VIEs how they are safer, and yet we still see a ton of piggy banking behavior. What I call piggy banking behavior, we've talked about piggy banking IBKR, that is kind of a risk that you face with VIEs in the West. Can you only imagine with a more complicated VIE, right? Yeah. Such as these, right?
Well, I mean, what
are the incentives?
And we're kind of even seeing like the fruits of that too, with some of these companies continuing to dilute shareholders as well.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Piggy banking.
Yeah.
They're piggy banking you. So the right here, look at point 3, Austin. Can you read out point 3 to me?
Foreign investors gain a controlling interest via the shell company.
Pause there.
Chinese owners.
What is that first part of the sentence says? This is what gave it away, that they don't even understand at all.
Foreign investors gain a controlling interest via the shell company.
Okay. So here's the best part. So even the people who kind of disagree with us on some things, respectfully disagree with us on some things, they acknowledge that there's no control.
Everybody who's disagreed with us has acknowledged that they don't control the
business. and even some of them have said the reason why the VIE exists is so that China can avoid having the foreigners control their entities. So the fact that foreign investors gain a controlling interest, via the shell company, but Chinese owners retain the majority of the voting rights in the original business. Because, okay, so technically how some of the VIEs can work, and this has been somewhat of the case, they can allow for voting, but basically it's a custodial voting system. So you see these again, three shadow figures over here. They're like an act as your custodian, and they can vote on your behalf if you tell them what you would like them to vote for. Does that make sense? But at the end of the day, there's a vague binding between what they have to follow the vote, because they are the actual owners of the shares. you have a contract with them and they're your custodian, and you're just trusting them, and you actually will never meet them. And it's not the custodian of the ADR, which is like some added little complication. The custodian of the ADR is like, for example, for Alibaba, it's Citigroup. And I've seen some complaints that the most talked about VIE is Alibaba, and that's because it's the most popular stock. But all the Chinese companies are all VIEs, as addressed in this article. That's actually the only thing they really get truly right in terms of analysis. All of the Chinese companies are VIEs, and again, they say the fact correctly, but they don't derive from that fact the proper conclusion, which is that the United States is the only actual risk of the delisting of the entirety of the VIEs. China has no incentive to delist the VIEs. Now, I will add this one caveat. China has a somewhat of an incentive to delist the VIEs from the US stock exchange. Somewhat. Okay, you could argue it somewhat in a logical sense. You could build a logical tree. The reason why is,
okay.
Well, the CCP, they enjoy having control. They enjoy micromanaging things. And Hong Kong is controlled by the CCP. Regardless of what you may think, it's controlled by the CCP at this point. And if you're trading on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they have a greater ability to micromanage from every aspect of the business entity, from the IPOs and everything. As long as they're still kind of trading on the NYSE, they're reliant on the Western markets in that sense. But if they can bring it over to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they can control every aspect. So that's the incentive they have. Now, the counterpoint to that is that they still would want the United States to trade on the United States Stock Exchange because it gives them a tremendous more access to capital than otherwise would be if just on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good. So that's my complaint with this company. And the problem, I'll actually showcase another one, and this is from Reuters. And the funny thing is, this is classical journalist majors. You know who they cite?
Anonymous sources.
No, they cite Bloomberg. So yeah, so like it's basically the same story repeated again, but basically they pair it off of each other and then it just spreads. And then so they don't really do any more legwork. I mean, I maybe someone out there will find someone who's done the legwork. I'm sure there is. But the point is, these are very popular sites, right? These are very popular sites where people get their news. And Reuters is considered to be a very respected news source. And I think it's more respectful or more respected than even Bloomberg. However, by just looking at that, for example, I see a very poor level of analysis, very poor level of actual investigation. And then it kind of further makes me question, everything else they're going to be putting out. And so as finance news goes, I would never really rely on them. I don't really care what they have to say, because if they get one thing wrong, I can't rely on them at all. It's like if I was talking to you, Austin, and like you let's say you work for me and I rely on you to give me reliable information in order for me to make the proper decisions. And then let's say you have a coworker, and your coworker, you two are competing, right? So let's say you give me unreliable information that causes me to do something that then, causes a negative consequence.
Yeah.
How likely am I to rely on you going forward?
Not likely.
Not likely. But for some reason, these organizations can sometimes get a pass. And I don't give them a pass. I say immediately, like, if I can, for example, and this usually happens, I say again, this usually happens when you take on a profession and then they report on that profession. It usually is the wake-up call. That's what I've noticed. So when I see that someone trusts them for something, let's say they trust the CNBC for financial news reporting. And then let's say CNBC, and let's say this person is, I don't know, a random thing, a plumber, right? Just a random thing that came to my mind. And then CNBC reports in the plumbing industry. And then the plumber has intimate knowledge of the plumbing industry. And then they see that CNN's take on the plumbing industry is quite ridiculous and very lazy. Okay. Well, then this plumber would rightly think, okay, well, if they put that level of work into analyzing the industry I work in and it's terrible, well, what else did they do? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What else did they not put the work into? So then going forward,
you start to like call into question too, just the entire validity of everything, their
Well,
entire source, basically. Like, you
it's
start questioning the entire thing.
it comes down to the lesson. Another lesson about investing is you actually don't want to rely on individuals. You don't want to rely on these organizations for your news when it pertains to your money. I mean, you can have a separate discussion about, like, sure, you want to get your little daily dose of like politics drugs from them.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
call it. Wherever you are in the world, you have, which outlets you're talking about. But if you're talking about where the news or the information hits your wallet, I mean, let's be real. You can ask that question to yourself: do you trust them enough to put your money where your mouth is, right? And if the answer is no, then why would you listen for anything? To be honest, at the end of the day, all the research you can do on your own. You can do it sometimes even better. And then, like, I'll say this, at the very most, I'll say you can, or sorry, at the very least, you can take little snippets from the reporting. So, like, for example, we found one good thing in the Bloomberg article, which was talking about the United States, except it's just when they started to give their opinion about it, it was started to get,
Yeah.
But even then, you saw that the information that they were saying as a fact, for example, that China was thinking about it, is questionable because that comes from anonymous sources. So you see, it's nuanced. So it's like,
It is.
their analysis was terrible. Some of their reporting was okay, right? The US one, but they didn't analyze it from there. But again, if their analysis is what I see it is, I don't want them to analyze that. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just tell me what it is, and I'll do the thinking. You can just, I don't know, do whatever. And then they also report on something that I can't really know to be true. So at least we can verify the United States because it's past actions, and we can verify those actions that they have delisted Chinese companies with links to the Chinese military. And then we know that the SEC, I think, just went through their decision, or to go through with delisting Chinese companies that don't follow strict audit.
Yeah.
But we know that there's problems with the FASB classification of cash and cash equivalents, which we still need to do a video on.
With the capital restrictions.
Yes, capital restrictions,
yes.
and how that does change the nature of cash, but GAAP doesn't currently reflect that. But anyway, so that's pretty much like the announcement. I want to say the consequences of these articles is that it makes the argument incorrect. So, for example, if China itself does not go after delisting Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, or not Tencent, because Tencent's on the over the counter, but Baidu, JD.com, and all these other ones. There was one that was Baozun. Yeah, I remember Baozun. Yeah. So all these companies, if China doesn't go after it, then people are going to see that and say, well, they were lying. So then I'm going to dismiss the entire threats about the VIE structure because it's all BS. And then do you see how the damage that can cause?
Yes.
Because it's like the boy who cried wolf. So they're going to be the boy who cried wolf. Nothing's going to happen in that sense because they're right. You see, this is where it is. They're right for the wrong reasons. And it's worse than being wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I always wanted a good example. This is a great example. Thank you, Bloomberg. You gave me a great example of being right for the wrong reasons, right? Caution on the VIE, completely destroyed on the analysis part. So that's why we are trying to get out that information as much as possible, because this by the creators who are making content right now about Alibaba, Tencent, all of them, about delisting risks, they're right. It is FUD. That's just FUD, and that's terrible because there's legitimate problems, but that's going to take away from it because that's just FUD, right? There's no legitimacy to those issues. I do not, again, expect the Chinese to delist themselves. I think the United States would be the problem. That's the one you actually want to, pay attention to, being the delister.
Or unless Chinese companies try to circumvent the CCP.
Yes. You want to make sure that they're always, doing the little favors for the CCP, making the CCP very happy.
Exactly that. All right. Any closing thoughts before I wrap up the show here today?
No, that's pretty much it. Let's see. 10-cent Alibaba stock price go up.
Nice.
That is my thesis.
Fabio now has skin in the game regarding these investments, and we are your hosts, Austin and Fabio. This is the Capital Mindset Show. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Please share the video. It really helps.
And questions
also,
down below.
Yes, questions down below. We answer any and all. And then visit our website at capitalmindset.org. And take care, guys.